The class today is a class about retopology, and more specifically, covering the whole workflow of retopology from beginning to end. So we'll start in ZBrush, and we'll start with a high poly model, and we'll go through all of the steps to prepare that particular model for retopology. We will talk about how to import it within your own software of choice to start the retopology process. We have on the website different classes that are specifically focused to using the retopology tools of both 3ds Max and Maya. And at some point, perhaps, we will also record classes as to how to do retopology using other software, including Blender. But for this particular class, the goal is to go through the whole workflow. High poly, import within the software, and then we'll talk about everything that comes after that. So we will talk about how to iterate on top of a retopologized object, how to do a test bake, and how to see where we need to improve the low-res that we have created upon the next iteration. So this particular class really is about covering the workflow from A to Z for retopology so that you have all your questions answered next time that you have to retopologize a particular model. Let's get started. So I'll just write down here what the different steps are for our retopology workflow. So that is retopology, that's a lot of O's, workflow. There we go. So step number one really is to prepare our high-res data. And that involves really two sub-steps, if you will. First, we have to decimate our high-reses because if we have a high-res that's been created within ZBrush, let's say, it's very possible that our model, in fact, it's very likely that our model is going to have dozens of millions of triangles, and there really isn't any retopology software out there that really supports having that many triangles on a mesh that we can realistically work with for retopology. So pretty much anything that we want to retopologize has to be decimated. And the process of decimation is simply to reduce the number of triangles and really only keep the triangles on a mesh that really do contribute to shape and detail and to get rid of essentially all the other triangles there that we don't need. So ZBrush is the software of choice to do a decimation, so we will certainly go through that. And you'll see that we'll be able to take a model that has, let's say, maybe, I don't know, let's say 10 million triangles, sometimes even more easily. It works well for models that have more than that. And we'll be able to really bring those models down to somewhere around between 200,000 to maybe up to 1 million triangles there. And that will make the next steps in the process quite manageable. So that's our step 1A is to do our decimation. Step 1B then will be to do a quick UV and bake of some textures, including a curvature texture. So auto UV, let's just call it like that. Should probably use a smaller brush here. So we want to do auto UV plus a quick bake of some textures that will help us when it comes to seeing and perceiving details on the high res. So that's going to help us guide our retopology process afterward. It's not strictly necessary to do that, but I really think that it simply helps to do a better retopology when we do that. So we'll do that together. Once our high res data is prepared, then we essentially want to import it within our software of choice and do our retopology there. So step number 2 would be our retopology proper. So many O's in here. So retopology, especially since I'm recording at the same time, kind of makes it have to keep track of all those O's there. So retopology proper within our software of choice. And if we wanted to break this down to two different steps, we would say 2A would be simply the import process. Very simple, as you'll see, import process. And 2B would be our retopology. This is the essentially the step of the process, if you will, for which we can use either Maya, 3ds Max. I really like to do retopology within 3ds Max. It's not nearly as popular software now as it used to be, but it still is a great modeling tool, and that's why I really love to use it to do retopology. We could use something like TopoGun. Could use Blender, of course, which I also hear that Blender has some pretty good retopology tools. So it is my goal at some point for us to have a class on the website that is dedicated to Blender retopology. I suppose I just have to actually find someone to record that. Let me here make the canvas a little bit bigger. Step number 3 in the Retopology workflow is to do a test bake, because it's really not possible to really validate whether a retopology is successful or not and whether it is good or not if we're not actually testing the bake that, or rather, if we're not testing a particular bake and to see what a normal map looks like once it is applied upon our low res, it's really impossible to validate whether that low res actually works or not. There's a lot of subtleties that you really can't quite judge unless you have a normal map that has been baked. Things like you'll see that on a low res, often you have polygons where the diagonal, you're not quite sure if it's in the proper orientation or not. You'll see that will be something that's going to come back a lot once we do the retopology per se. And really the only way to see whether a diagonal is facing in the proper direction or if it needs to be turned is really just by doing a test bake and then just looking at the result there. So doing a test bake of the low res, of course, which we could also here break down into 3, or rather 2 steps if we wanted to. One would be just doing auto UVs on the low res, and then 3B would be the bake process, baking. It's very common that after that test bake that we have to do some changes to the retopology. And you'll see that this is kind of a bit of a process that we have to do. We have to afterward do a second iteration, or just iterate, I suppose, would be our step number 4. We have to iterate on the result. We have to take the low res for which we have done the test bake and we have that test normal map. And then we have to simply look at where we can ameliorate the low res. We have to go in there, we have to make changes until it looks the way that it needs, or rather we have to improve the result that we're going to get from that. And then we have to do a test bake again. So we could almost say that this here kind of more or less throws us back here and this throws us back there afterward. So we kind of get within a loop of just looking at the result from the test bake, doing some changes to the low res, and then doing another test bake, and then doing that kind of loop until we have pretty much addressed every issue that we have upon our low res there. So that's really the process per se. As you can see, it's not that complicated. We really have 4 major steps. It can usually take perhaps a few days to get through that process for a complicated character, because the retopology proper, step number 2, can be quite time-consuming, especially with modern video games, modern day characters. The poly count keeps increasing, and therefore we need to put more and more polygons over our characters. You may actually notice that I have omitted here automatic retopology tools such as Z remesher there. So let me just write this down here. So auto retopology tools such as Z remesher there. So it's actually not part of the pipeline that we will be following. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with using Z remesher to do a bit of a base for retopology there. But myself, it's not really something that I have a tendency to use. I have a tendency to simply retopologize things manually from scratch myself. And there's actually quite a lot of seniors that I know that actually like to do it that way too. You could say that part of that's because we've kind of have manually retopologized things from scratch since the beginning. But I do very much believe that also, because I have tried myself to sort of integrate some of these tools, so Z remesher there, within my own retopology workflow a few times. And the reason why it hasn't really stuck with me is because often what's going to happen is, so first of all, there are problems where you'll wind up having spirals sometimes. But beyond the problem of spirals, the thing is that these automatic retopology tools, such as Z remesher, they kind of don't always place exactly the vertices where you kind of want them, or the loops that you are getting, the flow of loops that you are getting isn't quite exactly what you're looking for. And so I always kind of find myself erasing large parts of the Z remeshed mesh. I find myself erasing large parts of it and restarting those so that I get the exact proper edge flow that I want, or that I get the exact vertex placement that I want. And because I am simply redoing large parts of the mesh, then those parts that I am redoing myself, they don't quite work with the parts that were there to begin with. Either there isn't the exact same amount of edges, or the vertices they're not quite placed exactly in the same location to sort of cleanly connect together. And so I find myself then erasing even more of the mesh. And so I kind of almost get to the point that I'm almost redoing most of the mesh, or that I'm kind of spending a lot of time trying to connect whatever I personally manually retopologized with what was there before. And ultimately, I don't necessarily gain a lot of time, but I do complicate my life because I'm always kind of thinking of, okay, how do I make this work with what was there before? And so I actually find in a way that it kind of almost complexifies things, you know? Like if these automatic retopology tools were always giving the exact, like the best solution ever, then life would be great and it would make a lot of sense to use those. But myself, you know, I just, I find that the control that I get out of placing every vertex manually is really worth the little bit of extra time that we spend doing our retopology, you know? Like ultimately, if a character takes you, like, let's say that you're working on a character like that's very complex and it's going to take you 2 months to do it, right? Then it doesn't really matter if you're going to spend like 1 extra day doing the retopology because you've used an approach that was slightly slower, if ultimately it means that the result is better that you're going to get out of that, right? So yeah, like for me, those retopology tools, if people find a great way to sort of integrate them within their pipeline, I think that that's wonderful. But personally speaking, it's not really things that I have tendency to use. And so we won't really cover them today. Now, that being said, if we wanted to integrate those automatic retopology tools within our workflow, that would be somewhere between step 1 and step 2 there. So we could say that we would have somewhere here, let's say step 1.5, or perhaps it would be 2, like 2A and 2B would become 2B and 2C, and then 2A would be like auto retopo or something, right? But like I said, we're not going to use that together. That's not part of what we'll do today. And therefore, we won't talk more about using Z remesher as part of our pipeline, as part of our retopology workflow there. So yeah, that's the workflow. As you can see, it's not that complicated. We simply have 4 major steps there. But of course, you know, most of our time is spent really just carefully looking at our mesh, sort of analyzing if our vertex placement is where it needs to be, if our edge loops are flowing in the proper direction there. So it's not technically demanding that much to do retopology, but it does ask us to really think a lot about the placement of every vertex that we put on a low res there. So let's see what this looks like in action there. Let's take a high poly and let's go through the steps to prepare that particular data to be retopologized. So our friends at Chaos Masons have very graciously lended a few of their models for us to work on and do our retopology with. And so this is Deep Angel from Marco Plouffe, and you can find renders of this particular creature on his ArtStation page. So we'll go ahead and we'll do a retopology of the torso of this particular creature. We're not going to retopologize the whole creature because this creature is really complex. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on here, and as you can see, there's a lot of like holes and there's a lot of like little cavities and small caverns pretty much everywhere over the character. So we're not going to retopologize the whole creature because that would start to get pretty repetitive. But we'll do a large part of it at the retopology. So we'll certainly retopologize the head. We will retopologize the torso and the shoulders so that you really get a chance to see the full retopology workflow and really see an in-depth use of the retopology tools that we have. And just like a creature like this can probably take a few days just to retopologize because you really want to start to place edge loops in very specific locations. You want to really follow the fleshy kind of structures that are on the surface of the creature. And so really controlling the particular edge flow, really making sure that we are, like here within the neck, trying to really follow these kind of gills that he has there. All of that's very important at the retopology stage there. And so it takes a lot of considerations to retopologize a creature like this. So there's a lot of little subtle details here, like really covering and capturing these kind of nice sort of organic frills that he has here over the sort of handles that are there. I'm sure these things are there so that his mom can just carry him around. I'm sure that's why these things are actually there. And so having enough geometry to really capture that is going to ask us to do some manual work to make sure that we are adding enough geometry here for that, but then not adding so much geometry that the model just becomes a high res itself, right? So there's actually quite a lot of things here that we have to be very careful with in terms of retopology as to how we will approach them. What we want to do here, of course, is to first prepare this particular model to be retopologized. And so we start here in ZBrush, right? And we start with a model that we can see here. So just for this part here, just for the torso and the head, we have about 4.6 million triangles, or rather these are points, but I pretty much always think of one being equivalent to the other there. We have here, this is the bottom of the character. We will prepare this for retopology. We'll go through the process of retopologizing, or rather preparing the whole model for retopology. But ultimately, we won't retopologize the bottom of the character here. But you can see that this is another like 3 million triangles there, or points, in fact. The arms themselves, they have 10 million points. So we're pretty much already up to 20 million just for these parts of the character that we have looked at, right? And we have even more stuff here. We have tentacles, we have teeth. And so there's way too many triangles here for what we can really realistically import within our software of choice to do retopology. And so our only option here is to do a decimation to really bring down the amount of triangles and vertices that we have over the mesh to a manageable level. I like to target about 1 million triangles. That's good for modern day PCs. If you have a bit of an older PC, maybe you want to reduce that a bit further there. But I do find that 1 million triangles for me usually gives me pretty good performance within our software of choice, and still allows to capture a lot of the very fine details that we have over the surface there. So what we're going to do here is simply to use Decimation Master within ZBrush and within Z plugin there. So we have Decimation Master right here. And this will really allow us to do decimation of the full character. So it's really simple to do a decimation. We pretty much just want to follow these particular steps here. So step 1, step 2, and then step 3. In terms of options per se, we don't have any UVs right now. We don't have any poly paint right now. And it's unnecessary to freeze the borders because we don't really have any borders. It's all a closed mesh. So there's really no reason to play around with any of these. In certain isolated cases, it makes sense, but most of the time, just keeping these 3 options off is going to be completely fine for you, unless there's really some poly paint that you really want to keep can pretty much just ignore these in most cases. Which really brings us down to step number 2 here of using Decimation Master, which is that we need to pre-process the data that we have. Decimation Master needs to do some pre-calculations to know which vertices are more important on the mesh itself, so that when we do give it a target of decimation, it's going to know what to keep and what to get rid of. So because we have multiple subtools here, we have like 7 subtools, we can do a pre-process all, which will do that pre-calculation for all of the subtools that we have. So let's go ahead and do that. So as you can see, it took about 3 minutes to complete the pre-process of all the subtools that we have. Of course, it's going to take you a bit longer or a bit shorter, depending on your computer there. But the whole process is relatively quick, right? So we're not wasting too much time on this. And now what I want to do then is to use step number 3 of our decimation plugin here, which is that we want to decimate each of these different subtools to a certain level there. We're not going to do a decimate all that we have here, because every subtool that we have kind of more or less already has a slightly different density of polygons over the surface. So this would kind of be a little too coarse, as I suppose, as a decimation solution there. So I kind of want to go through each of these different subtools individually and kind of more or less judge how much I should decimate them, with the goal in the end to be at somewhere about 1,000,000 points or so. If we can go lower than that, then that's fantastic. If we're slightly over that, that's okay, but it really shouldn't be by much, because meshes like these tend to be pretty heavy in our software of choice afterward. And so this one here, we're at about 5,000,000 points or so. It's about 4.6, but let's say it's 5,000,000. It's going to make our life easier there. So let's say that we want to keep maybe about 200,000 points for this, perhaps, would be the end goal there. So 200,000 of 5,000,000 is about 5%, if I'm not mistaken there, maybe 4% or so, right? So let's write that down then. So let's say that we want to keep about 4% or so here. So let me just write that number down. And you can see it brings us to about 374,000 polygons, in fact. We could try 3,000 or 3%, why not? So let's go ahead and then let's do a decimate current. And you can see here, so we have reduced from what was about 5,000,000 points down to 240,000 points. And you can see the effect on the surface. From this distance here, we really can't see much of a change, right? If you kind of look very closely, you can kind of see that some of these details are becoming a little faceted there. But in general, this is the magic of Decimation Master. It keeps all the details that you have on your mesh, but it really drops the triangle count to as low as it needs to be to match the target that you have given it there. So it's really, really wonderful as a tool. It works absolutely wonderful. If we take a look at the wireframe, then you can kind of see what's going on there, right? So this is what we started with. And I can also zoom in here. You can see how small each of these polygons are. And this is after the decimation. So you can see here all the triangles that have been kept, or rather all the vertices that have been kept, and all the ones that have disappeared. So it really does a fantastic job. I really, really love this decimation tool there. I do encourage you to experiment, of course. If you have a model which has a surface that is very, very smooth, you can very likely drop this even further down. And of course, don't use the percentage here as a dumb number, because that is always dependent upon the resolution that you have started with and how detailed your own model is. What I'm usually looking for is, from this particular distance here, even this distance here, maybe a bit closer than that, like from, relative, like not ultra close up, but kind of zoomed in on the model. Like, can we drop the resolution of the model down while still retaining a lot of those little details that we really want to see when we do our retopology, because they can be important when it comes to placing different polygons on our low res there. So we're at about 140,000 points, so that's fantastic. Next, I will select this particular subtool and we'll do the exact same thing, right? So you can see that this one, we're actually starting from 10,000,000 points there. So the arms are actually quite a lot denser than the chest was, which means that we may want to lower this percentage down even further. So if I just play around here with the slider to kind of refresh the numbers here, right? So maybe you could go for maybe about 2% for the arms. More or less gives us a number of points that is somewhat similar here. So let's decimate this and kind of take a look at the resolution we're going to get out of that. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we're winding up having 192,000 points here. I think that's more than fine. Could maybe try to drop that even further. Why don't we give that a try? Just see how low we can go, right? What if we had 1% here that we kept? See this could still actually work. Like you can still kind of appreciate a lot of the nice details that we have over the surface everywhere. So what else do we have here? We have this part here. This may need to be a bit more high res to make sure that we can cover and keep a lot of these kind of gills that he has there. But we only start with 3 million points here. So maybe somewhere around 3%. Maybe you can kind of try that. See, so 3% will give us only 100,000 points. That's okay, right? We still retain a lot of those nice details, but we only have 100,000 points. So I think this works really well too, actually. Cool. Okay, so we have 100,000 points here, 100,000 points there, 200,000 points for this part here, which brings us at about 400,000 points so far. That's pretty good, right? These are fairly low res to begin with, only 1 million. So let's say maybe 5% for these, which still gives us a mesh that has about 50,000 points. So all in all, we're actually winding up having about 400,000 points, as you can see. That's great. You know, we really want this number to be as low as possible because the more we can save on points, the more it will help performance afterward once we get to the retopology stage. The best thing there, of course, is just to test it. It doesn't take that much time to decimate a mesh, right? So you can just decimate a mesh, bring it within your software of choice, try to see whether you're getting acceptable performance out of it. And if that's the case, then that's good. If your performance kind of suffers, like when you're rotating around the software, if you can see that it's quite slow, then maybe you want to drop the point count even further down on your decimation. So really the best way for you is just to test this. Bring this model out of ZBrush within your software of choice. Give it a try. Just, can you navigate within the scene with the decimated high poly in there and still have a nice smooth frame rate? If the answer is yes, then you're good. If the answer is no, go back here and decimate the mesh further. We're pretty much ready to export this out of ZBrush and throw this within Substance Painter to do our quick bake of the high poly. There's really no particular reason in this case why I should keep all of these as different subtools. You can definitely keep multiple subtools here. It's not a problem. But in my case here, since I want to just move fast with this, I'm not going to keep these subtools separate. We're just going to merge all of that within one big subtool, which in a lot of cases for you would also kind of work, but that's up to you to see really. So let's go to merge. Let's do a merge visible. And now we have all of the subtools of our character all merged into one here. So we're pretty much ready to move on. We can throw this within Substance Painter to do our baking. So let's go ahead and export this out as an OBJ, and then we will load that within Substance Painter. So we are launching Painter right now. Once Painter is started, we will simply go and load our OBJ in here. So let's create a new scene or a new project. Let's load our OBJ here. And here we will use the option within our import settings that says auto unwrap. So we really want to make sure that that is turned on. And that will simply allow Substance Painter to automatically unwrap our high res, so we don't have to do any unwrapping ourselves. It's normal for this process to take a few minutes if you have a high res that is very dense, but you can just take that as a great moment to go and either have a bathroom break or go and make yourself some coffee or something. And so here's the result. As you can see, it's not great in terms of unwrapping. You certainly are not going to impress anyone with the quality that you're going to get out of this, of course, but that's not the goal, of course. Our goal isn't to do something that is optimized and usable in a video game, of course. Our goal is simply to not have to do and unwrap ourselves and have something that we can continue with. Let's go here within our texture set settings tab, and let's scroll down until we'll get to bake mesh maps. Here we will be able to bake out the textures that we want to bake in this particular case. For the output size, we're simply going to use the biggest texture that we can for a few different reasons. First is that, of course, we're not throwing this within a video game once again, so it really doesn't matter. But ultimately, because our unwrap is so garbage, we really need to bake this out as a huge texture so that we do wind up having an acceptable density within our textures in the end. So let's bake this out here as an AK texture. And as you can see, I'm actually turning off a lot of the textures here, and we're just keeping the normal map and the curvature, because for the most part, that's really the only textures that we're really interested in right now. And let's make sure here to turn on use the low poly mesh as the high poly mesh. So here we are baking our normals and our curvature from the low poly itself onto itself. And this is the result that we're getting out of this, especially for the curvature, right? You can see the curvature, you can see how it's a bit darker within the crevices. You can see that all the sort of natural edges of the model are all a bit lighter there. So this is going to help us just to see where the edges are on the model once we do our retopology here. So that's pretty much all we need, really. It's as simple as that. And now we can go ahead and we can export this out here. So here we need to go to our output template and select the mesh maps from the template to export from. All the default other options are totally fine. The only thing we want to make sure, of course, is that we are exporting these out as AK textures. This curvature texture that we have baked out, we'll actually use it as an albedo, just to be able to see where the natural edges are over the model. So I've opened the resulting PNG here for the curvature texture within Photoshop. And I'm just going to go here and I'm just going to, first of all, play around with the levels here just a little bit, just to try to get a bit more contrast out of this curvature texture, first of all. And then afterward, we will simply apply a color on top of this to colorize this so that it's not a simple grayscale texture that we have. Let's go ahead here. Let's create a new layer. Let's take a bit of a fleshy color in this particular case. Let's fill our layer with this particular color. And let's just play around with the blending modes until we find something that kind of looks good for us. Kind of like this one here, this soft light, you know. We keep those white kind of highlights that we have over the natural edges of the model, but the rest of the model kind of inherits this kind of more or less fleshy color in a way. So you really don't necessarily have to do this, but I just figured in this case that it would just make the model a bit easier to read. So there you go. So our high poly data has been decimated. It has been exported out of ZBrush. It has been auto unwrapped using Painter, and we have baked out a curvature map that will help us just to be able to see a little bit where the details are on the high poly when it comes to doing the retopology per se. So pretty much we're ready to move on to the retopology proper of this particular creature. We will, of course, load the OBJ we have exported out of ZBrush within our software of choice, whether that is 3ds Max, whether that is Maya, whether that is Topogun, whether that is Blender, or any other software that you would like to use to do your retopology. We'll simply go ahead and load our data in there as an OBJ, and we will go through the retopology per se. So I invite you to check out the retopology video for whichever software that you intend to use to do the retopology with. And you'll actually find that all the retopology videos that we have on the website, whether that's retopology with 3ds Max, Maya, or anything else that is there, I do invite you to watch them all if you really want to learn retopology, because in all cases, I retopologize a different part of the model, or I just retopologize something different. And in all cases, I do talk about my approach to retopology, what it is that I'm looking for when doing a retopology, why is it that I place vertices, where I place them. I try to really share my own thoughts, what's going through my mind as I do retopology there. So I do invite you to check them all, okay? And you can just browse through them if you want, and you can skip ahead, of course, if there's part of the classes that you're not interested in. But they're all actually complementary, and they all kind of give you a bit of a different window as to into what goes through my mind as I do retopology there. As you can see, though, this particular class isn't done. What we are going to do in the next chapter of this particular class is to take the model that has been retopologized using, once again, whichever software that we want to use there. We'll take the model that is the result of that, and we will go through the iteration process. We'll first do a quick test bake on top of it, which, as you can imagine, we'll use some of the same tools that we have used so far to do our quick bake on our high poly there. So we'll go ahead and do a quick test bake of our resulting low res, and then we will talk about how to go about doing an iteration on top of that and continuing the retopology process until we have reached its conclusion there. So go check out those classes on retopology, and then come back here once you have completed your first retopology pass over your character to continue the retopology process until its very end. So here we are in 3ds Max, and we have completed the retopology of this creature, or at least of the torso. So let's go ahead here and import this within Substance Painter to do a quick bake of the high poly upon this low poly here. Of course, it would be useful to have this be symmetrical, so let's just go ahead and do that. And we'll also have to clear the smoothing groups on top of this to make sure that the whole model is completely smooth. So because this is 3ds Max here, I'll just go ahead and I'll just apply a symmetry modifier on top of this. And of course, if we're using Maya, then we have a different tool in there to symmetrize the model, but in this case, this will work quite well. Let's go ahead here, take the mirror, which is actually at the proper location, but we are not mirroring the proper axis. Here we go. So we have this here. Let's collapse that. Let me just check the border, of course. Every time we do a symmetry like this on a model, whether it's 3ds Max or in a different software, we obviously want to make sure that we have a proper seam in the middle, or rather that we have a proper edge loop in the middle, and that there isn't stuff like this here that's going on. So we just go ahead here and just weld a few of these vertices. A trick I like to do actually is just to take an edge here that is right in the middle of the symmetry of a character, and just do a select loop on top of this. So I have this button here in 3ds Max to do so. Of course, we could just select the loop within Maya too, within other software, and any edges that have been selected are all part of the same edge loop, which means that the edge there is nice and clean. And we can see here that the edge loop has actually stopped right here. So we can just zoom in here and try to figure out what's going on. And here it actually stopped, well, because we have a pole here. So that makes sense to me. Let's go ahead here, select the loop again. Let's see where it ends. It ends there. See? Like here, it actually ended on a vertex that is a bit of an artifact from the retopology process. So let's go ahead here. Let's just delete that. Continue here, selecting the loop. Let's see where it stops. Or if it goes all the way. Now here, I think there's actually just polygons completely missing in there. Let's go ahead here, let's close that. Let's select this vertex, this vertex. Let's do a connect here between these two. And here, let's just do a cut. It goes from here to there. That should be good enough. Let's continue selecting a loop. Let's see where it goes. There's a pole there, so that's okay. All right. All this is super clean. Here's another vertex that shouldn't be there. It's an artifact of the symmetry process. See, like this shouldn't stop there, of course, and it's because these two vertices here are unwelded. In fact, there's a whole bunch of vertices here that need to be cleaned up. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me see where we were, right here. Let's weld this. Let's remove these two vertices. Collapse, 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 collapse. And there you go. So we have a really nice now clean symmetry line. So let's export this out. Or actually, before we do that, another thing we want to do in this case is just to clear the smoothing groups so that everything is on one smoothing group. So actually want to apply one smoothing group to the whole thing as opposed to clear the smoothing groups. But I suppose clearing can be part of the process too. So let me select all the polygons here. What I like to do is just do a clear all, and then afterward, click on one here within our smoothing group. And as you can see, what it does is that it applies one smoothing group to the whole object, which means that now the whole object is completely smooth. There's no more hard edges anywhere. And if we were doing this within Maya, what I would do instead is that I would select all of the edges, and then I would make sure to convert all of them to smooth edges. I would do that, and that would be the equivalent operation. And that's pretty much it. So we're ready to throw this within Painter to do our test bake. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just export this as an OBJ. That's completely fine. From 3ds Max, we want to export everything. Make sure to export these as polygons. Make sure that that's turned on. If you're exporting triangles, that's going to be a problem. So just set this to polygons and you'll be completely fine. And so now we have the low res that has been exported out of 3ds Max or Maya or whichever software that you have. Now we need to, of course, to export the high poly out as well. Depending on how dense our high poly is, we may or may not want to export the high poly directly, or we may also want to decimate it. Now, personally speaking, I'm not a fan of doing decimations on high polys before we do our final bakes. Okay, so the final bakes that we'll do completely in the end once we're done retopology UVs and we're ready just to do our final bake before starting to texture something. I'm really not a fan of doing decimation of that. In fact, we do have a class on the website that is on the topic of baking. And at the end of that class, I do share my thoughts as to why I think it's bad to decimate a high poly prior to doing the final baking. It simply leads to a lower quality if you're looking for the short and sweet answer there. So it's not necessarily a bad idea to decimate a mesh before doing these test bakes. But it is not a good idea to decimate a mesh before exporting it out to do a final bake. So I hope that that's clear. And now let's go ahead here and decimate this. We have about 20 million points right now. It's more around 3 to 5 million points I'd like to be. And so that is about, I don't know, like maybe 15, 20% maybe of this particular number. I'll just set the decimation percentage here to 15% and do a decimate all so that it's a bit faster to go through the decimation process. And there you go. So that's 3.375 million. Let's merge everything together. Let's go to merge. Let's do a merge visible. But you can see how nice and high res this is. So this is some pretty good data for a test bake. Still not good enough for a final bake, but definitely good enough for a test bake. So let's go ahead here and export this as an OBJ. Once we're in Painter, let's go to File, create a new project. We can use the default one. The default template is totally fine. Select File here. Let's select our low poly. Let's once more auto unwrap this. Document resolution, set this to 4K. And that will be it. Let's see what these UVs look like. These don't look all that great. Okay. Thank you, Painter, for such magnificent UVs. We could we could definitely just do these manually using Maya. So I suppose let's go ahead and do that. So here we are within Maya. Let's take this here, go to our UV editor. Maybe we could try something here. Let's do an automatic unwrap with this. I mean, in fact, let's just keep it this way, right? That's pretty much all we need. So there's a bunch of ugly seams left and right, but that really doesn't matter. That's actually going to be good enough for our needs, I think. Okay, so life is good. Let's export this out. Let's reselect our file, document resolution, 4K, auto unwrap. Definitely don't want that now. You're still using the same template, so that's fantastic. Let's discard that. Okay, here we go. It's looking pretty good. So this is our low res, of course. Now let's do a test bake. Let's go to texture set settings, and here, let's scroll down, bake mesh maps. Let's bake this once again as an AK texture. And in this case, I actually just want to bake the normal map. I don't really care about the other textures because the normal map really is the only thing that contains information that's going to be useful for me right now. Let's click on the little icon here, load our high-res mesh. Here we go. That's pretty much it. Let's do our bake now. So there we go. We've baked out our test normal map. Now, what we simply want to do is to simply look at this model from every angle. We want to really find the places where the quality of the model doesn't seem to really be what we're expecting it to be as good as we really expect it. Just to help us kind of see the model a little bit better, I can go ahead here and just create a new fill layer and just bring the albedo value a little bit down because by default it's actually quite high. And we could also play around with the specular if we wanted to. Maybe try to make this a bit glossier, a bit juicier. But for the most part, this is actually pretty good. So yeah, let's go ahead here and just look at the model from every direction, right? And let's try to really figure out where are the zones where this could be improved. At the same time, let's go ahead here and let's simply make sure that we can also take a look at the wireframe at the same time. So I'll just keep this open here. This display settings little tab, and once in a while here we'll simply turn this on just to look at the wireframe. Although by default I actually don't necessarily want to look at it at the beginning. I just want to take in the model first and kind of see if anything jumps up to me left and right as zones that are problematic. Let's rotate this slider around. Let's take a look at those little frills that are there. See, these are actually working quite well. The fact that we have split these and added a bunch of triangles here actually makes these look quite well, you know. This is one of the things we do want to pay attention to, you know, like when we're rotating the layout around. You know, see, like from this angle, this looks a little low res. You can kind of see it here. But truth be told, I mean, you know, the moment that we're kind of rotated just a little bit like this, doesn't really matter that much. Here, it would be nice to see, like, see a little bit of shading here, feeling that the surface kind of rolls over a little bit. We're not quite seeing that. Maybe there's a minor adjustment we can do to the low res, you know? Like the fact we can see it here, but we're not seeing it there. It's a minor point, but we could address that. Let's continue looking around first of all and see if there's anything else that's interesting. This spot. See these gills? These gills actually work quite well. Like if you look at them like this, I mean you can kind of tell a little bit that they don't necessarily have 3D volume. But that's looking at this in a very precise way, you know, of course. The moment that we're looking at the creature from let's say this distance here, if this was in gameplay, maybe this is a boss, this is a enemy that you're fighting, you know, like you'll be hard pressed to really pay attention to that. So this actually works quite well. Ooh, what's here? What's going on there? Oh, that's just a baking little issue. We could actually fix some of these. We could just go ahead here and do a bake again and just reduce a little bit the frontal distance here from 0.01. Let's go to 0.005 and the back distance too. So there we go. That took care of that problem here. So we can appreciate that. So yes, we're hunting for places where the model just doesn't seem to work all that great for us, right? Maybe in this zone here, maybe we can clean this up here a little bit. It looks like this should be something that's kind of concave, but topology there isn't great. Like, um, unfortunately, I mean, maybe I should pat myself on the back, but I'm actually not seeing many issues for the most part, um, which I kind of disappointed by because I thought that I would have issues to fix that would be more obvious and this that would kind of jump out to me. Like this here, this I don't necessarily like. Um, we could probably add another cut here to get this to be a bit rounder. But yeah, like, so we kind of want to look for places where we feel as if the surface just doesn't look all that great. We especially want to pay attention to the silhouette, like all these pizza crust bubbles there, make sure that their silhouette looks nice and round. You don't want to just rotate around and kind of really take a look at those. But yeah, I'm unfortunately not finding that many zones that I kind of wish we could easily target as things uh, to make better. I think the teeth were not exported. I think that's why the teeth kind of look like this right now. For some reason, I think the teeth didn't get exported within the high poly. Yeah, that's it. There's no teeth here. Let's rebake these. Let's select the teeth here. Okay, yeah, so this could use a little chamfer here. If you take a look here, I'm not quite fond of like I have to zoom in here quite a lot, but I'm not quite fond of having this very sharp line that's here. So we could probably chamfer that. Okay, so there's starting to be a few things left and right, right? There's nothing huge right now that we're spotting, but there are little things that we are spotting that can be improved on iteration number 2. So let's go ahead and let's start working on those. The goal at this point really is simply to observe things that can be improved and then to go back within our retopology software and address those. And we will keep doing these kind of changes until we are completely satisfied. So it was this particular edge here. We could start with that one here. We could start by addressing this one here. One little thing, let me just reduce the FOV in this particular scene a little bit. I like a camera that's a bit more orthographic, although I don't like orthographic cameras, but I like them a bit more orthographic than what we have by default. Okay, so this edge here, see, from this angle, I quite like what it looks like. From these angles here, it's starting to look a little weird. So it kind of okay, yeah, I'm kind of looking to see how big of an edge I have to address there. It could be tempting. Now, if this is a creature within the game, just a creature, I don't necessarily mind the lower resness here, but we could definitely add another loop here. Why not? Maybe this is a little too low res, right? So I'm kind of tempted to take this loop here and then maybe just to chamfer it within 3ds Max so that we wind up having 2 loops. And then uh, here it's going to help to make the silhouette a bit more, just a bit more high poly, so to speak. So let's go ahead here. Let's start with the chamfer. And just like that should be okay. And then let's take, so here, these edges kind of need to stay there. But these edges here, I could select the whole ring here. Go all the way around until we're at the same height. I should probably reapply symmetry on this, in fact. And on this one, on these ones here, I'll just do a let me detach this again. Let's open our loop tools. Here, I'll just do a space on this, just to evenly space out these loops. So see, that's a little bit better. I suppose we could space these two, maybe. Just want to have these edge loops just gradually converge like this. Something that kind of looks like that. I think that's pretty good. I think that should address that. We could space these here a little bit. In fact, I don't see any good reason not to make these rings here of even length. Just like that. It's pretty good, okay. Yeah, so let's erase half of this. Let's go to front view. Just erase half of this so that we will reapply the symmetry later on. Okay, so that's problem number one that's addressed that we could spot. We also had in this particular zone here a few different things that we could improve. And we were looking specifically at this border here. So here, I'm kind of hunting for the places where let's say from this angle here, I can't easily see just the how the surface just kind of rolls over a little bit, right? It's a minor point, but it's, since we're there, we may as well kind of look to address that. So yeah, so that's about here. So, and I guess I kind of understand here. It's kind of, is it misplaced here? What's going on? Okay, so let's take this particular vertex, let's move it down. Let's move this one up here a little bit. So we're essentially just hunting for like angles on the model where the surface doesn't look quite the way that we want it to, right? And then we're just looking to address that. But I don't think we necessarily in this case want to start adding more geometry to this. Because I'm quite happy overall with how this particular zone looks. It's just this little thing here that kind of bothers me a little bit. In general, I'm actually quite happy with how these kind of little organic frills kind of look. So for the little popcorn here, there was this here that was kind of bothering me. This may look like a case of a diagonal. It's not quite in the good orientation. If we kind of look at this here, right? Kind of look here. So we have a polygon here, which diagonal may not be in the proper orientation. That may be what's going on. Oh, actually, see, this is one of those examples of triangulation that is different between what 3ds Max gives us and what Painter gives us. Because I didn't actually export this out as triangles. If you remember, I said that let's export this out as polygons. And so Painter has actually triangulated this polygon differently. So I should actually export these out as triangles from 3ds Max. I should actually do that. Because see, like here we're within Painter, right? And if you look at the polygon that is there, see how it looks kind of concave from this particular angle here. So the diagonal is kind of going across like that. Let me turn on the wireframe. See how the diagonal is going from here to there? It's kind of going like that. While within 3ds Max, see, the triangulation is actually kind of like this. It's in the opposite configuration. So this is actually one of those examples that we've talked about a few times, of what happens if you bake a mesh that has not been triangulated. Painter is free to essentially apply a different triangulation to your polygons than what, let's say, 3ds Max was giving you, what Maya was giving you. So this is always the danger there, right? Okay, so I mean, we've done a few changes so far. Not a lot, but we've done a few changes. So let's go ahead and re-export this out. Same thing, let's do symmetry first. Now, since I haven't touched any of the loops here, or any of the vertices here, I'm fairly confident that this will be completely clean. Yeah, see. This edge loop was all the way around, so that's wonderful. So that's nice and clean. Finally, let's clear all our smoothing groups. Let's apply everything to smoothing group number 1. Let's export this back out. Okay, so let's try something cute here. Let's go to project configuration. Let's reselect our low res. Let's try to auto unwrap it. Ah, that's why. Okay, so we were generated only missing data, but there was already UV data there to begin with. So that's why we had not created new UV data. So in this case here, let's say that we want to recompute all the UVs. And now let's redo our bake. That's absolutely wonderful. Okay, create a new layer here, fill layer. Let's bring our albedo value down a little bit again. Fantastic. Okay, yeah, so now we have a better configuration here, or rather, we have the same triangulation now here than what we had within 3ds Max. The only thing now is, well, we still have the problem of this being perhaps a little too spiky for me. So we'll still go ahead here and address that upon the next iteration. But it's actually looking better to me. But yeah, we could use maybe an extra polygon here. Okay, have we fixed the other issues that we had? Oh yeah, see, this looks better. This already looks a bit more high quality as I rotate around. Can kind of feel a little bit more the fleshiness kind of rolling over in there. So that's cool. This is a bit more high res, so that's really, really cool. Let's see if we have addressed the issue here. Yeah, we kind of have. Now it's kind of catching the light here a little bit more, so I'm actually quite happy with all these changes everywhere. Okay, so let's continue hunting for things to improve upon the next and what will be our third iteration here. Let's start with this, right? Here, kind of don't like this kind of spike that's here. So there's a few different ways we could fix that. Simplest thing really is just to cut across like that, just to add a vertex. Actually, could I cut like this? Mm, yeah, I'm not sure I like the result of this. Let me get rid of that again. Okay, so we had this one vertex here, which is essentially all we need. So we kind of want to move it out like this and just create a structure that's going to wind up being a bit rounded there. Okay, that's cool. Let's just leave it like this. Not the cleanest topology right now. It's true that it's tempting to see if there's a way to fix that. Actually, I kind of even prefer something like this. Yeah, it's a lot of triangles, but at least I know exactly how the triangulation is going to be. Although I'm still tempted to try and connect, try and do this here. Now, this is getting dirty, but let's clean this up. Now, this is giving me a few extra vertices to play with here. So obviously, I should have the high res visible while I'm doing this. That would help. Um, let's add here 0.00 or 0.05. Okay, that's a bit, that's better, I think. Let me manually move this down. Manually move this vertex up. Like this. Okay, now let me just look to see if there's a way kind of make this a bit cleaner, because it is getting dirty. It is getting slightly dirty. Okay, this is better. I think we could live with this. We're not going to win any prizes for this topology, but it should hold up, I think. This is the kind of thing that you do, and then if ever a Skinner complains, then you think about addressing it. So about those teeth again, was there anything worthwhile to talk about? Of course, we have these little artifacts here, which are there to, again, just baking problems, but those are fine. Um, if we treat this as a main character, I would be interested to add a few extra cuts here just to have the front of the face to be extra round. The way I have structured this, you can see it as a loop that kind of goes all the way around. I could actually easily add a loop here now that I think about it. So we could add a connect here, maybe even add two of those, and then try to select all of these edges here. Take a ring, take this ring, and just do a space on this. This should work quite well, actually. Yeah, see? This should work quite well. And then let's just use a relax here. All right. Don't mind what's happening on this side, since we will resymmetrize this mesh later. In fact, let me just go ahead here and just erase half of the model already so that it gets a bit less confusing. Here, there's a few issues. Yeah, see, this is kind of what we're looking for. This is like, what, as you rotate around, see this zone here, this really doesn't look all that great. So there's definitely a cut or two missing in this particular zone. Let's go ahead and do that. So it's right here. It's this loop. See where our high res is? Oh yeah, see, it's this kind of depression that's there. It's not currently supported. Or it could be this one here. Well, let's just address the two of these, right? So here, let's cut across an X like this. Let's cut across an X here. Got to watch out when you get like kind of shading like this. It means that there's actually two overlapping vertices because the cut tool 3ds Max has a tendency to do that. So let's go ahead here, select these two vertices, do a weld. You can see now the problem is gone. So this vertex here, this vertex there, this vertex. It's kind of hard to see, right? Probably somewhere here. It should be good. Okay, yeah. I mean, this part would definitely need more work. Just like we had done on the shoulder here, it would be really nice for these kind of frills to have a bit of a thickness the way I have given it here, because this works really well to me. This kind of thickness that's there, right? When we take a look at this. I really like the fact that there's a bit of thickness there on the low res. So I should definitely do the same thing on these frills here over the arm. Get some different places here where, yeah, like see that this is not all that great. This is not all that great. There's more work that would need to be done on the low res there. But at least I think at the very least we should have addressed this problem here. But hopefully you kind of see what the idea is here really. The idea really is simply to hunt for all these little zones left and right that we feel as if the low res doesn't look quite well, or like the relationship between the low res and the normal map, just there's something there that's not quite satisfying. It kind of doesn't work that great, or from certain angles we expect the player to see something. We feel as if the normal map doesn't look quite right, as if it's not quite fitting over the surface. And then we want to re-import the model within Painter, redo a baking, re-evaluate how our low res is looking. So let's go ahead here and let's export this one last time. Let's go back within Painter. Let's go back here within our project configuration. Reselect our low poly, auto unwrap, recompute everything. This is still using the previously baked texture, but I kind of don't quite trust these anymore. So let's go ahead and rebake these. Yeah, see, so this is already looking better. We're not getting that kind of ugly shading, that kind of ugly kind of concavity that we had there before. Although this definitely still would need more work. This is looking better. See, just an extra cut there for me kind of works a little bit better, so I'm happy with that. And then we have the front here, which is really nice, and we have that very nice high-res silhouette to both the front of the face here and to the chin. So that's wonderful. So this really is the process. test bake, rather import your model within Painter, auto UVs, do a test bake, really hunt for those places where the relationship between a normal map and the low poly kind of looks like it needs to be improved. Or just look at the silhouette of the low poly really with a normal map and just, sort of ask yourself the question, is the silhouette high res enough, if I can use that term for a low res? Is the silhouette high res enough for what I need this for? Am I happy with that, or do I feel as if the silhouette should be more high res, right? So you kind of want to be looking for those. You simply want to do some quality check over your own work there, and you can consider that you are essentially done with the retopology the moment that you have done a few of those iterations, and that you are quite happy with the result, and you feel as if there's really nothing else that you can personally improve upon your low res. From there, where would you move towards to? Well, you would actually move towards first. Actually, let's write this down. This will be a really nice way to conclude this particular class. So after retopology, where do we go from here? Well, first, we want to do those hard edges. So we want to apply those hard edges where we want them to be, of course. This is something that we obviously had to think about a little bit when doing the retopology itself. Of course, that kind of thought had to be going through our mind. Where do we want to have hard edges? Where do we not want to have them? There's plenty of videos now at this point that we have produced on low-res character breakdowns that are either available on the website directly or that are on YouTube. And we do talk about these hard edges, where they are worthwhile to apply, where not to apply them, these sorts of things. So I think that there's some pretty good information there for you to go through and to get a chance to see where are hard edges commonly used, where you can use those yourself upon your own models. So that would be, I suppose, step number one after our retopology. Or if we're working within 3ds Max, those would be smoothing groups. Number two then is to do our final unwrap. Number three. Oh, actually, one thing that I'm forgetting here. Let's put this down as 1B as a step here, which is to clear normals. If you're looking for that in 3ds Max, it's actually, you simply have to apply a modifier on top of your stack, which is a normal modifier. Or sorry, you have to apply a edit normal modifier. And then just do a Control A, select all, do a reset here. Because you may have normals that have been explicitly set without you wanting them to be. Now, of course, if you want to have explicit normals somewhere, disregard what I'm saying here. But it does happen that sometimes you get explicit normals that you don't expect to have, and these will screw up baking, and it's just really, really bad to do that. So if you're within 3ds Max, apply edit normals modifier, do select all, reset. And if you're within Maya, you simply have to select your mesh, go to UV, or rather go to mesh display, and then simply do a unlock normals. You can see the kind of effect here. So here, you can see exactly we had locked normals over this. So you definitely want to go here and just do unlock normals. And in this case here, let me go ahead here, shift right click, soften harden edges. And here I want to soften everything. So that's the equivalent of our hard edge application here. So yeah, 1B, clear the normals. Don't forget about that. So number two, let's do our final unwrap. We could use Maya for this. We could use whatever else. I really like to use Maya. I like to use the Unfold 3D algorithm that they have in there. There is also, if you're looking for external software to do that, there is also Rhizome UV. That's really good. And every 3D package now has some unwrapping tools, of course. So You shouldn't lack in tools to do your to do your UVs. Choose something that you like. But if you are looking for recommendations, I do recommend either Maya or Rhizome UV. After you're done with that, you're pretty much ready to export your mesh to do your final bake there. So save at this point, okay? Because the next steps that we will do, you don't want to keep those permanently over your model. And what I mean by that is you have to, before export, you want to triangulate your mesh. Now, if you are exporting out from 3ds Max, then as we had seen, you can simply triangulate your mesh upon export. So do export selected here, and then you can, within the export dialog box, select triangle. So that's great, that works fine. If you're within Maya, the way that you can do that, of course, is simply to select your mesh, go to triangulate. And then it is ready to be exported out. But as I said, do not save this because you don't want to save a triangulated mesh. This is really just before you export this out here. So before export, triangulate, but do not save this. And then 5, you want to export this out. Then you go to ZBrush, number 6. You export your high-res undecimated. And number 7, do your final bake in your software of choice. If you're looking for a recommendation, I really like Painter. Else, you have Marmoset too. Some people really like that. And then you would move on to texturing. So that's essentially what you would follow after you are done for your retopology, the kind of steps you want to go through with your mesh as you prepare it for its baking, and then eventually its texturing there. So that's it. I hope this was useful and that you have learned something in the process. This was our retopology class. In fact, our classes on retopology, because there's quite a few of those now on the website between the character model breakdowns, the retopology, the tools, usage classes, this particular retopology workflow class. So it's a lot of content on the website related to retopology and low-res creation because it is a really massive topic. Even then, I feel as if there would be more that we can add, and we probably will in the future. But for now, at least, I hope that this is all very useful and that you have learned something in the process there. So thanks for sticking around, and until next time, take care.